Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the Kingfisher Knits podcast. My name is Madeline and I am your host, and I'm talking to you from my house in Zurich, where I live with my husband and our two young children, though I am originally from the UK, and this is a podcast about my adventures in knitting. It is now springtime here in Zurich, which is a really nice change. We had a couple of really good spring days before it then snowed again, but now spring is definitely here, but it's that sort of a bit warmer but pretty grey and drizzly type spring at the moment. But I got myself some nice tulips when I was shopping last week. We've already had them a week, which is why they're now looking a little bit less than super happy, but I was really happy to get them in the house, and we've also been growing some herbs and the like and getting stuff feeling very much spring-like. And it is Easter this coming weekend. Actually, I'm recording on Maundy Thursday, which is the Thursday before the Easter weekend. So happy Easter to everybody. I'm going to start off at the beginning by telling you a couple bits of admin. The first and most important regarding what I wanted to talk about is that the Collyheen shawl is now out on Ravelry. If you want to hear more about the Collyheen shawl, you can go back and look at previous episodes. It is, though, the shawl that I have done in collaboration with Amy of Stranded Dye Works and of the Stranded podcast. And it uses 3 different weights of yarn, so it's meant to be a lot of fun, and it's a very simple to work shawl using 1 skein of fingering weight yarn, 1 skein of lace weight mohair, silk blend yarn, and 1 skein of a DK weight yarn. So you can go back and look at previous episodes if you want to hear a lot about it, but what I wanted to say here and put all the links down below this video on YouTube will be the links to the pattern on Ravelry, and I wanted to mention it now because there are still a couple of days if you watch this as soon as it's released to get 20% off the pattern on Ravelry if you use the code RIPPLE, that is RIPPLE, all in capital letters. That information is all going to be down below this video on YouTube, and that is valid until the end of March 31st. If you are interested in getting kits, however, for the shawl from Amy from Stranded Dye Works, then she currently has kits listed in her shop. There are 3 different options. There is what she's called dark, which is the colourways that I use. Then there is pink, which is the sample shawl which the lovely Sarah Hepworth knit for us, and that I showed off 2 episodes ago, so episode 20. And then there is blue, which is based on the colours which Selma of the Little Big Knits podcast used. So I will put all the necessary links in case you want to go and check out the kits. The kits do include the pattern within the cost of the kit. So if you do want to get a kit, you don't need to pop off to Ravelry and buy the pattern. You will get a Ravelry download code with your kit. So that is everything I wanted to mention about that. The code is RIPPLE because Collyheen is Irish Gaelic for ripple, because the shawl is a large, slightly modified half circle with all these the bands of the different yarns. It made me think of ripples going across the surface of a lake, and hence the name. Okay, so that was the first and most important information, just so that if you were interested and you didn't know it was out, or you wanted to get a chance to get a kit while they're still available, and also to use the code in the Ravelry shop. The second piece of admin is just general for the KALs. So what I didn't say at the beginning is that I put all the show notes and the links for where you can find me immediately below this video on YouTube. But I am Kingfisher Knits on YouTube. I'm Kingfisher Knits on Twitter and Instagram. I have my own website, which is madelinewindsor.com, and I am Madeline Windsor on Ravelry. We also have the Kingfisher Knits group on Ravelry, and this is where these KALs now that I'm going to mention are hosted. So we have had 2 KALs going on, both of which I'm ending at the end of this month. I say the end of this month. The last day of the month is Easter Saturday. It's highly likely I will not manage to close the threads until Easter, so you're probably going to get until April 2nd or so to enter things should you want to. The first KAL is the garment Firsts KAL. This was to knit a garment I will link down to the thread where you can see what the rules and what have you were. The idea behind it is that you knit something about that knit is a first for you. First garment, first time using a certain yarn, first time doing a certain technique, etc, etc. It's been an awful lot of fun. I have started 3 garments and finished 2 throughout the time of this KAL, and it's been really, really fun. And I think a lot of people have caught the garment bug, so anything that I think we can do to encourage each other, because they're bigger knits to get through garments, is always lovely and good. It's always nice to chat to people about what you're knitting anyway. And the second KAL that I'm talking about that is wrapping up is there is the FO thread open for finished Artemis or stracciatella shawls. Both are designs of mine. So if you have knit one of those, please make sure you go and enter that into the finished object thread so you're in with a chance of getting a prize. I talked about prizes in the last episode, so if you didn't catch that and wanted to know some information about what the prizes were, that's back in episode 21. Admin is done. Okay, so I'm going to dive straight into whips, which is what I generally like to talk about first. I have 2 whips that I'm going to talk about today. One is on either side of me, so I'm just going to grab this one. So this is just living in a project bag, which I made myself from a tea towel, which I think is pretty obvious, but I'm not much of a sewist, and I really enjoyed making this bag, and I use it all the time because it's quite sturdy, because it has interfacing of the sort of slightly squishy type, like for quilting, and it's not like super sturdy like canvas, but you know what I mean. It's not just like quilting cotton. Anyway, I am showing you a new whip that I started, and the yarn that I'm using 2 different yarns. So I had this a beautiful, I guess it's called a sock set from Fondant Fibre, and this was on her British BFL base, so it was 100% superwash BFL, and this was part of a club which she did last summertime, and each month you got something different, and this particular month was a sock set club. So I had this 100 gram skein, it's called Lavender Sunset, but it also came with a mini skein. I realise now I chose not to use the mini skein in this shawl that I'm knitting, and I think I put it in my bag of mini skeins because I don't have it here. But this is that skein of yarn, caked up. You're getting pretty accurate representation there, and I think the colour name is perfect. What you're probably, it's a mauvey pink type of lavender. I mean, there are flecks which are more purple and more lavender in certain places, and then it's got these beautiful, really rich golden yellow tones, and exactly that kind of sunset red running through it. And altogether, I think it works really, really beautifully, and I really like this base. So I'm using this, and I have paired it with leftover yarn from the Snowmelt shawl, which I knit last year. That was Helen Stewart, the Curious Handmade, her mystery knit along last year. She's got another one just about to start, but I don't think I'm taking part in that one this year, at least not as a mystery, because I just don't have the time. But last year I took part in the Snowmelt mystery knit along, and one of the colours I used was this. I don't have the tag anymore, but it is Lolo Did It. It's her everyday sock, I think she calls her normal 75-25 blend, and this is the Hello Gorgeous colourway. And what I found interesting about this is that in my Snowmelt shawl, I paired it with yarns with pinky tones and a brown yarn from Hedgehog Fibres. And here, pairing it with this more mauvey colour, it looks less pink. It looks like a very, very pale lavender, and it's funny how it goes both ways. So I think it's a really, really great tonal colour. And it can go with a lot of different things, actually. So this is what I now have left after I used about 22 grams of it already in the beginning of my shawl. I'm not going to use any more of it. And just a little word about what this shawl is. So I am knitting this shawl for my great aunt. She's called Kathy, and she is the younger sister of my granny, who passed away quite many years ago now. And while she's not someone I get to see a whole lot, throughout my growing up, they were never that far away. We did see them fairly regularly. And she had complimented me on my knitting, and I had said, is there something that I could knit I asked her daughter if there was something that I could knit for her, for Kathy, and they said that she said she'd love a shawl, and when I asked what kind of colours, she said pinks to mauves. So I sent a picture of this skein before I caked it up, and they said that looked lovely. And my aunt she's very slight, she's always been, she's very slight and small, and I think she means a shawl to, you know, to go over her back, more classical style, you know, around the shoulders to keep the back warm, and a little bit round to the front, maybe something that can, you know, can cross over and pin. But I didn't want to make a great big shawl, but I thought it probably would need, I would like it to be bigger than just one skein, one fingering weight. So to beef it up a bit, I was going to use the mini skein from this, and then I decided that I preferred the way this colour went with this, at least for this design of how I was imagining it. So I do plan, I think, to write up this shawl design, and probably what I will do, it's actually very easily customizable based on what amount of yarn you have. So even if this particular piece ends up being, let's say, somewhere between a shawlette and a shawl, I would include information on how to make it bigger if you have more yarn and you would like a bigger shawl. So without further ado, this is what I have so far. Of course, it is stocking stitch, so it is curling up here, but I will show you that a little bit more. But maybe you can see the shape. So it's a bit more than a half circle, and I did that on purpose because I want this to be super easy for her to wear. She doesn't want to be fussing around. It's something she probably just wants to put over herself as something pretty and slightly warm, but she didn't want anything that was too heavy. So I'm using this shape, and I really, really like the way that it will make something with a similar depth all the way around, hence why I'm saying more half circle, but it's going to have a slight crescent to it. So I don't know what you call it, a crescenty half circle or a half circle crescent. Anyway, I say that because a lot of crescent shawls that people make nowadays are really quite long and thin and never get very deep, whereas this one will have a good depth to it. So what I did was I started with that first colour that you're seeing, that you saw, the Hello Gorgeous plain, the tonal colourway. Sorry for that noise. And then I worked out, I did all my maths and how much I need to get to where I want to get. And so I decided to then start putting in the other colour. And what I did was single row stripes, which is a lot of fun. I didn't want really stark stripes. Again, thinking that this is going to somebody who just is wanting to wear it as an accessory. I want it to be a nice design, but I didn't think that for this I wanted very stark stripes. So I went for these single row stripes to work in the second colour. And now it's just rolling up, but it's just stocking stitch for now. And now I've already started working for a while just with one colour. But you can see that they blended in really nicely to each other. And I really, really like that. So I think where I have this little progress keeper here is basically where, that's where I started to, I stopped doing the stripes and started to just knit with the main colour here. So what I have done is I'm going to finish off what I'm calling the main body of the shawl, let me go like this, and I'm doing an applied border. It's not going to be very deep. Again, I don't want anything that's too over the top or too fancy. I want it to just be really elegant and pretty. So it's going to have, it's going to get a little bit bigger than this now, and then it will have an applied border all the way around the edge. And this is why I say that it's quite easy to adapt, because I know I did a swatch first, so I know how much yarn I need for each repeat of the border, which is not very many rows. So I just needed a multiple of that number of stitches for each row pair of the border chart that I've already written. And so what I will be able to do when I write up the pattern is to say, give certain amounts of stitch counts that you could work up to be able, and tell you how much yarn you would need in each case to then be able to still finish the border, if that makes sense. Once I've actually written it and thought about how to explain that, that should hopefully be clearer. But I still think it's going to be quite a nice size shawl. It's still got, a way to go before that happens, and it will block. So it's still going to have, plenty to go around someone's shoulders, and then there's the border. So I'm confident that the size I'm making is going to be right for the purpose that it has, but I'm also confident that this design is something which is going to be quite easily adaptable. So I've decided to call this shawl the Inanda shawl. Inanda with an I, was the name of the house where my great aunt and uncle lived for all of my childhood and up until fairly recently, actually, when they moved out, as it was not a place that they could manage to take care of themselves anymore, living there. So, but I associate that with them, and maybe I think around the world, I don't know how common this is, but in the UK, it's quite common that houses are named. So we don't always call houses. It depends. Normally it's houses of a certain size and up, but not always. Also, small cottages can work this way. That they will not. It will not be number 5 on a certain road, but it will be on a certain road, and the house will have a name. And this is pretty common in the UK. So that was the name of their house, and so whenever I used to write them letters, it would always be to Inanda, the name of their house on their road, and so I linked that with them, and I thought that would be a lovely fitting name for this shawl design, as it completely came out of her request for a shawl. When I first asked her and she said she would like a shawl, I just immediately started looking at my library and Ravelry. I wasn't even thinking to design anything, I just wanted to knit something simple, and I just didn't find... I thought maybe triangular is good to get a good amount out of a single skein, or a little bit more than a single skein, but still have a nice depth and something that fits naturally nicely around the shoulders. And I just didn't find one that I liked, so I was starting to think of a triangular design, and then I just thought, I want something that's going to go really nicely around the shoulders, so that's why I went with that. Okay, I think I've talked enough about that. Yeah, it's only been cast on for a few days, and it's just very simple so far, and I work out, as I always told you before I start knitting, especially on shawls and things where you can, at least for me, quite easily calculate out how many stitches you're going to have by the end. I always have a little crib sheet where I write down the row counts for each section, stitches added, and also what percentage I'm at. So I already know I'm over a third of the shawl done. So that's always nice. So I always say so, I know, terrible. I'm just going to have a quick sip of my chai tea in my periodic table mug, and which is appropriate because now I'm gonna grab my periodic table project bag, which, as I said, always has to have a project in it. So I finished a project which was living in here, which I will talk about in finished objects, and I have started a new whip. Now I'm looking, where's my... Okay. This whip does have a nice little swatch, and God only knows what I have done with the swatch. I know I left it to dry, I measured it, and then I cast it on, but one would have thought I would have put it in the project bag. That's what I normally do. Anyway, there is a swatch missing in action. I spoke to you last time, do I have the tags? Yes, about how I had this beautiful yarn from the Wool Kitchen. The Wool Kitchen is in the UK, and this is her Blueface Leicester DK base, and I have it in the Heterochromia colorway, which is this lovely, I would say on the bluish end of an elephant grey, if that's a thing. That's what it makes me think of, with these sections of basically undyed with flecks of these neon pink, blue, yellow, and is that orange, or is it just where it's mixed? I think she just used yellow, blue, and pink, and then there's a few others on where those have mixed. And this I am pairing with this colour, Geek. So what I had was 4 skeins of this and just 1 of this, because I am doing, so I did swatch and I did decide to go ahead with my plan and do the Radiate sweater by Jochi Locatelli. So I have to say how much I love this base. Just knitting with it, just knitting the swatch, I really enjoyed it. It's... I don't know, maybe this is like the perfect thickness of yarn for me, and I love that feel. It's not like super, 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 super soft, like silky falling out your hands, but it's still, there's no itch to it. And I am knitting this. I presumed I would have to go down a needle size because I generally do. Although that said, now I've now knit, or been knitting on, I haven't got finished everything, 3 patterns from Jochi Locatelli, and I've actually always tried to swatch with smaller needles and never needed them, so maybe I knit at a similar gauge to her, because normally I have to go down a needle size or 2. Anyway, I'm knitting on my 4mm higher sharps, and I want to talk about needles in a second. I'm going to come back to that. And yeah, I did all of this in a couple of evenings, and by evening I mean my evening knitting session is very rarely more than an hour, often less. So yeah, this is like a couple of hours knitting maybe. So it's a top-down sweater, knit in the round. It has a yoke, and I don't have the pattern printed out because I have, so this pattern was in Interpretations 4, and I have the ebook. In theory, I actually have the actual printed book from Pom Pom. It was posted to my parents' house last year when I bought it, and they opened the book to send me the e-code, sorry, the Ravelry download code for the ebook, which you get when you buy the hard copy. And I went off to pop that into my library, and then when they came to visit me, I was like, where's the book? And they were like, what book? And they say they can't find it. So I'm probably going to have to search for that myself when I go to their place, whenever I manage to get back to the UK. Anyway, so I haven't got a picture here to show you, but what you can see there are these columns that are slip stitches. First just with one colour, then you start bringing in your main colour, at least in the background, and then I'm about to go to a point where now I make another bunch of increases for the yoke, and then there's going to be alternating columns of these slip stitches in each colour. It's been a lot of fun setting it up. There are so this, I'll talk about this in a second, the split. This is the back and this is the front, so even if I line them all up, you can see that there are short rows there which have raised the back of the neck very nicely. What I did, so this just called for a normal long tail cast on and then knitting a few rounds of ribbing. What I did was my favourite, especially when I have to do 1 by 1 rib, which this was, I did an Italian cast on. So you can see there a nice beautiful tubular edge there. And what I also did, this is purely an experiment, I don't know, it just came to me. I cast on 2 more stitches in total, so basically 1 at each end. I knit the ribbing flat back and forth because both that way you don't even have to stop and think about twisting your stitches when you're joining in the round. Ribbing's the same whether you work it in the round or flat. It's 1 by 1, so it's not like by joining the round you can just do knit stitches like with stocking stitch. You know, it's exactly the same flat or back and forth. And what I thought was I would cast on the Italian cast on, I would work the ribbing flat, and then I would seam it later. And therefore, I had cast on 2 more stitches, 1 each edge for the seam, which I will work. Sorry, the needles, of course, happen to be what happened. That's the end of the round. So I actually stopped at the end of a round. Yay for me. So they look a bit messy, but these stitches I will do mattress stitch with the tail, which I did not intend it to be that long. I just, pulled out a certain amount to do my cast on and had too much. Better too much than run out and restart. Anyway, and I'm just going to seam that up with mattress stitch. Maybe it will make no difference, but I just thought, one of the places where, I am all for knitting garments seamlessly and in the round. Probably not every single type of garment. I don't know if I would do that with a cabled garment or, but I have a couple of garments knit, or 3 garments knit all in the round, and they seem to have nice, okay structure to them, but I know there can be problems. And one thing I often thought about, so I knit the So Faded, which I knit in 1 colour, my Not So Faded sweater, and in that one you knit it from the top down, but you come back up to where you cast on to pick up and knit the ribbing up. So you have that hard edge, let's say, where you've picked up the stitches, which I would say, I would agree with some people, that's not as solid as a seam, but nonetheless, there's something there which means those stitches can't, overstretch. And when you knit top down in the round and there is no break, so you haven't knit top down and come back and picked up to knit your neckband, I'm worrying that there's nothing to hold that neckband, nothing that separates it from the fabric that has to stretch to then go around the shoulders, and that it's going to stretch. Maybe I'm totally inventing a problem here, and perhaps it's also because I had an issue with the neckline of my Blowfield sweater. I had an issue because of my gauge and the pattern. I was testing it, and then it was changed. So as I said, I've gone back and I'm fixing that. But it just made me think. It's basically no extra work whatsoever. So I'm going to give it a try, and we'll see if by having at least 1 seam here, my idea is that there's at least 1 solid bit there that it cannot stretch away from. So just make sure to bring that neckline back in. Maybe it makes no difference. I think the biggest difference is when you have a hard, bind off edge here that then you pick up and knit the neckband from. I think that's probably the best thing. or cast on edge, of course. Anyway, that was my thinking. I'm really, really loving it. I didn't knit on it at all last night. I was hoping that by the time I showed it on the podcast, I would already have the, started the columns where you also have the column of slip stitches in this yarn. But hey, I was really exhausted and I basically didn't knit at all, which is not uncommon for me. I actually wanted to show you the wrong side, because on the wrong side, only on the wrong side so far are you seeing that other colour, obviously, because there's you're getting the knit stitches. So what are the purl columns on the other side? Oh, I cannot wait till you start seeing that yarn. So what I decided to do also with this is to not alternate skeins up here, of the main colour, which has obviously these sections which will pull probably, because here it's more hidden. Maybe you'll start seeing some pulling in those bits when you start having the slip stitches on the in the main colour, and if I really don't like it, I'll probably just rip back. But I decided that I wouldn't alternate skeins here, but once I start and just knitting stocking stitch in the main colour, I'm going to alternate skeins. Okay, so that is that for now. I'm absolutely in love with it. It's totally addictive, and I'm just really happy that I'm finally making it, because I have always, sorry that I'm looking down and just keeping on talking to you. Oh, so rude. I have always wanted to make that. That's the very first pattern that I just couldn't stop looking at when I bought interpretations for. So, on to finished objects. I have been wearing one the whole episode so far, and I'm amazed I've kept it on because it's quite warm actually, and I'm wearing quite a lightweight jumper, but nonetheless, excuse me while I rearrange myself, I'm feeling uncomfortable. But this is the shawl, which I didn't really show off to you last time when I showed it to you in like a ball and spoke about the colours. I'm gonna take it off now, and then I'm gonna show it to you in full in just a second. Oh, here we go. In just a second. First, I'm just gonna quickly tell you about the yarn. I know I already did, but I seem to be getting new subscribers all the time at the moment, which is wonderful, thank you. I didn't say at the beginning of the episode. Hello everyone, welcome back to all my previous viewers. A huge hello to anyone new. Thank you so much for joining us. Terrible. Here we are with Stranded Dye Works again, and I was using 3 different colours of her solo base. These are the Eraser colourway, excuse me, the Party Dress colour, and Mettlesome. So I have knit a new shawl design in these 3 colours, and I have done it holding the yarn double throughout. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I really desperately wanted a heavier weight shawl. I have one heavier weight shawl, which is my Midnight Sherbet wrap, which is a 2-colour DK weight brioche shawl, and that's great. But I feel like I want like a sport weight shawl. I still like fingering weight shawls, but I just really wanted heavier weight shawls. And I have one shawl quantity of heavier weight yarn, which is going to be cast on at some point, but it's one of those ones that just keeps sitting there because I know what I want to do with it, so I don't know why I'm not doing it. Anyway, and I really thought it would be fun to have something where you hold fingering weight double, because we've all got lots of us have got bunches of single skeins, and I also used to buy ones, not so much always thinking that I would knit socks with them. I know a lot of people bought things because of, let's say, the sock yarn craze. I bought yarns if I really liked them, and I just thought, well, I can always pair them with something else and make a shawl. And sometimes you just are in, it feels like a lot of knitting to knit a 2 or 3 colour fingering weight shawl, because it's a lot of stitches, and a lot of people love doing that. I love doing that too, but sometimes I want something that's, let's say, what's the word? Faster, quicker gratification, that things, short and sweet and it's done. And so this whole project was conceived like that. It's all knit in garter stitch. You hold fingering weight double throughout. You're using 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn. And I cast on, ripped this thing back 5 times, got to the end, ripped the end back 3 times, finished it while still doing other knitting that you've seen, and it took me like 2.5 weeks, the whole thing. So I would say this ticked the boxes for what I was going for. And now I'm going to show you it off in full. It is that's what I was saying, a triangular-ish asymmetric shawl, but not very asymmetric, but it is not symmetric, knit on the bias. So I will start off over here. It starts up here with the cast on down here. I will say I made a mistake at the beginning, so this slightly rounded edge here will not really be present in the final, which is making this pull a little bit there. That was just a pure mistake of mine, and I ripped this beginning of this back 5 times, and I still made a mistake. Dear, oh dear. So that will be ever so slightly adjusted in the final pattern, so that will not be an issue. Okay, so this is the eraser colorway held double, and then here is a section where you're striping. Yarns are held double throughout, but eraser held with itself, and party dress held with itself, held double. So what I did in this case, I just made cakes of my yarn, and I pulled from, when I needed 2 strands of the same, I pulled from the center and the outside. And when I needed 2 strands of different colors, I just had 1 strand of each. So this is then a section where you've got party dress and eraser together, then party dress, then party dress and with stripes of mettlesome. It goes all the way down there. The 2 of them held together. I know that some people probably would not pair these colours. Something about these 2 colours together spoke to me. But I think the beauty of this shawl is that you can really use any 3 colours that you would like. And you'll get different effects. If you use mostly tonal colours like I have, you get more of a contrast, but you can see here I've also used a variegated yarn in the mettlesome, and if you use a variegated with another variegated, you would get a more faded effect. I would say some degree of contrast is necessary. And then we go into mettlesome held with, excuse my phone there, mettlesome held with party dress, mettlesome alone. This I think is my favourite bit, is mettlesome and eraser here. And then we finish with eraser. So what you will maybe notice is that it's not totally symmetric, as I said, which is not what I was going for, but it is not far off, so it's not tricky to wear. This is it folded in half. The point is pretty much in the middle there. It's ever so slightly more to one side. And you can just see that one side ends up being slightly thicker than the other. It's just a nature of how the shaping is done, but it's not something that really stands out. What you do end up with is that here on the end, you have a longer, thinner section of eraser. I'm going to modify this slightly. And here there's one end left. You see, I have blocked this, but I'm thinking of coming back here and just changing this end bit a little bit. I had considered, because I just love to use up all the yarn, or almost all. I never want to use up all the yarn because I want to write the pattern up and I want people to know that they have, they're going to have enough yarn, even for slight changes in gauge. So I never want to use up every last scrap, ideally. So I have, sensible amounts like 6 or 7 grams left of eraser and mettlesome, but I still have, I think, a bit more than 10 grams left of party dress. So another idea would be to do some stripes of party dress here at the end, but I don't really want to do that. I kind of like how it is. So if you have any comments on that, then please do let me know. This is a design which I came up with, which I had I had a set of ideas of what I wanted. Finger and weight held double. I wanted to have sections which were marled, which held different colours together, and sections which were not marled. Sorry, I should have turned that off. Sections which were not marled, and I wanted some stripes, and I wanted it to go from tip to tip. So here you cast on 5 or 7 stitches, and you cast them all, so you cast the same amount off at the end. So you don't have tons of stitches on the needles at any point. But apart from that, I just started knitting basically. Okay, yes, I said I started and ripped back 5 times, but that's because I was a complete idiot, and not because it's difficult at all, because I was a complete idiot. Anyway, so this shawl also does not have a name yet. I think in my spreadsheet I've just called it Spring Shawl because I was knitting it when spring started. So if anybody has any comments on it or suggestions for a name, then please just pop those down below. And I'm going to get on to writing that up as soon as I can. So I'm going to pop that on the back of my chair there. I have one more FO to show you. It's not, I showed it to you last week, but it is now blocked. So this is the pullover, which I have knit for my son. This is knit out of a 100% superwash, non-superwash merino yarn. This is a discontinued base. It was called the Helena Aran base from Posh Yarn in the UK, and this is the Gilly colourway. But this is a design which I'm going to now write up and which will work in any other similar, Aran weight yarns. So we have stocking stitch down here. It is a bottom up. Now we're getting all blue. How do I stop it being blue? Hold it back a bit. Let's wait for the blue to go away. All right. And we've got double moss stitch here. The back is just stocking stitch. And now that it's blocked, I can show you a little bit better the cable on the arm. I'm still going to put my arm in there just because it makes it easier for me to show it to you without flopping it around. So I chose this cable stitch because I thought it's a nice cable. How's that word? Like it's a nice cable. There's some interest to it without it being overly cabley, and I thought that it was one which looked good even on quite variegated yarn. So I have alternated skeins throughout. The only place I didn't was this short section, and you can probably tell there with this pooling. That's about the only place I did not alternate skeins. Everywhere else I alternated skeins because of this particular base, colourway, sorry, which was very variegated and I new pulled because I knit a little baby sweater in it before. And this comes all the way up here and this is the saddle shoulder here. So if I just center up what I'm trying to show you there, you can see the top of the shoulder there and the saddle shoulder shaping. And that goes all the way up nicely into the neck. So I'm really, really happy with this design. I could have I didn't have solid chunks of time. And if I really wanted, I could have written up probably both of these patterns by now in the last couple of weeks. Just sort of, stealing bits of time here and there. But I just wasn't in that mindset. I'm in the mindset right now that when I want to sit down and really, run through a whole lot of pattern writing in one go rather than doing snippets here and there. So it's going to be a little bit longer until this one is ready. I mean, hopefully not very, very long. But, and this one also doesn't have a name. I normally have names by the time I'm sort of blocked and done, but this does not have a name either. So suggestions on a postcard, by which I mean write them down below. So I am done with all of the projects I wanted to show you this week, and I just have one small bit of stash enhancement. So I am still saying so. Every now and then I have certain yarns which I really am interested to try, and perhaps I often, not always, will go and have a little look through Ravelry Stash and see what people have up for a specific yarn, let's say. I see who is willing to sell or is trying to de-stash some yarn. And I also use people's stashes on Ravelry. I wanted to say this once before. Sometimes you are looking up a certain yarn and you want to see what colour it is, and sometimes it's easy. A colour might be displayed on a yarn company or a yarn dyer's website, and I just often, especially if I want to buy a certain quantity of it, I will always try and go through the Ravelry search function of stashes to see if people have pictures of the same yarn that they've stashed. And often the colours also there will look very different. I'm not saying that this is totally reliable, but it's something that I like to do because you also then see a whole range of what that colour might look like depending on who took it with what camera and what phone. And often, whatever dominates there, I find tends to be kind of pretty representative. And it's been useful for me because I have a real soft spot for greenish blues, but I'm not such a fan of bluish greens. That sounds funny. But this is one of those things where often I'll look at a colour and think it looks like a perfect teal, really, and with the exact amount of blue and green that I thought it had. And then I'll go and look at pictures and finished objects that people are wearing made with that yarn. That's something you can also do. And it'll look way more green than I thought it did. So I think it's useful to do that. And also, on top of that, to see what people have made with that colourway while looking at projects on Ravelry. And it can show you how certain colours will knit up, which can be really, really useful, because some very variegated yarns, and by very variegated in this case, I don't mean the blocks of colour, I do mean something more like this, can look pretty different in the skein and knit up. So I use Ravelry an awful lot for these kinds of, a little bit of reconnaissance work. Anyway, a yarn that I wanted to try, and I really wanted to try it after seeing Kate of the Hawthorne Cottage Craft. Hawthorne Cottage Craft or Hawthorne Craft Craftage? Pretty sure it's Hawthorne Cottage Craft podcast. I will link it down below on YouTube. Was Kate Davies' yarn. And I was thinking of getting a couple of skeins from Kate Davies' website, and then I went to look on Ravelry and I saw someone was destashing a 7 skein set. So I say 7, then you'll see what I mean. So this yarn, this is the undyed one, which is one of the skeins. These are 50-gram skeins. This is Kate Davies' yarn. I looked up the pronunciation for this yarn, and it's something like Buchele. Some people I've heard calling it Buchel yarn or bus, almost like busel, but Buchele or Buchele, I think is what it should be, but that's the last time I'm going to really try and pronounce it properly. It's Scottish Gaelic, and it means shepherd, from what I could understand. From what I read, sorry. So it's a 100% Scottish wool, woolen spun, non-superwash. This colour, which I believe is the undyed, I could be wrong, it has this is a bird in Scotland, and I can never remember how to pronounce this either. I think it's just ptarmigan. There's a P there, but I think it's ptarmigan. Anyway, so this is one of the skeins. So this is a set, which, and this lady, I understood, so she was in Germany, and she had bought this. I think when this yarn was launched, you could get a 7 skein set, so that you got 7 colours came together with a book, and the book was all for accessories knit with this yarn. And she had knit with this yarn. She was not destashing because she didn't like it. She wanted to buy a sweater's quantity, and she didn't really want these single skeins of single colours lying around. Totally can understand that. And I'm often like that. You know, if you have yarn and you want to destash it, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's not great yarn. You just know you don't have a project for it anytime soon. There's other things you want to work on, and feeling like you have it around just, I mean, at least for me, can make me feel guilty. And if someone else could be using it or want it, then that's great. So she had actually already knit with 2 and a bit of the colours. And so she said that she would be happy for me to also have the item that she knit with it, because she didn't like it that much in the end. And that I could then, you know, use the item, which is a KAL, or I could rip it out to reclaim the yarn, which I think is what I might do, because it's also not something. So this is what came. So this is knit. This is, I think, a pattern from the book. Oh, there's a thread on there. I didn't look up actually which pattern this was. So it's a perfectly nice KAL. It's really not my colours. It's not what I would wear. So I think I'm gonna rip it out. And given that this is non-superwash yarn, I can, you know, split splice the yarn back together so that, oops, now we look ridiculous on camera. There we go. So that I can, you know, basically reclaim nearly all of the yarn. Ooh, bit of a bouffant going on there. So what I don't know, therefore, is she did include the tags, but I can't find them, of these 2 colours. I think this one was called Squall, which is this sort of beautiful dark grey with a sort of a slightly brownish grey, but I do not remember what this was called, the green. And this little band here, this is Highland Coo. Oh, so the Highland KALs, which are this colour. So that's those 3 yarns from that kit, from that set that she got. And these are the full skeins which she hadn't touched yet. And these are my favourite. Oh, got a label there. These are my favourite, these skeins. So I already showed you ptarmigan, this beautiful, I mean, they all have a slightly heathered, well, no, this has definitely a heathered look to it. This is called Ha. It's beautiful soft grey. Then we have, this is called Between Weathers, which is a beautiful blue. It's slightly less bright than that. That's going a touch more towards royal blue than it is. So bring it back a notch from that. And then my favourite, which is the teal. And this is called Isla. So Isla is an island of in Scotland, and it's not called Islay but Isla. This I know because of whiskey. So this I really like. So basically, when I bought these, I could have just bought the 4, admittedly, from her. She was keen to sell the whole lot as a bunch together, and I understood that. So I said I would take the other ones as well. I still think that they would be really nice contrast colours for potentially, if I do get more in the future, you know, to go as part of a yoke. These ones is probably what I'm going to use now to try it out, and I'm really keen on doing finally getting started on some colourwork mittens. This is the right kind of yarn for that. This is a DK weight yarn. So here you get 110 meters for 50 grams. So for example, Skein-Deer's Selby mitten patterns, they are worked in this weight of yarn. So I think I'm going to pair the blue with the light grey and the teal with the natural white. I mean, it also works obviously this way too. That just, the fact that both of these have some greyishness in them, it does work also, but I kind of preferred the more contrast that you get with the teal with the white, I think. So I think this might be my next, these probably will be my Selby mittens. I have the pattern. So to cast those on at some point. Obviously it's not mitten season anymore, but I'm not a very good seasonal knitter. So all yarny goodness and knitting is done, and I'm going to be rounding up this episode very, very quickly. I just wanted to say now one thing that came into my mind based on this, but if you're not interested in my ramblings, then by all means, we can part here and say goodbye. That's fine. What I did just think of, and it's something that is kind of an issue as a knitting designer. I have not been designing knitting patterns for very long, and so I can call myself a knitting designer because I have quite a lot of patterns out. I have a fair number of patterns out now, and I've published with different publishers, but a knitting designer, and all designers, which you know if you come from a design background, which I do not, don't work to the current season, obviously, because everything has to be ready. And in the knitting world, I would say on average, everything has to be ready, you know, a good 6 months in advance. So, and for the bigger companies, so if you, I haven't worked with these people before, but, you know, I've seen that, you know, for Vogue and Interweave, putting aside books even here, books are yet another thing, they take even longer, but just working for collections to go into Interweave magazines and Vogue, or if you work with bigger yarn companies, they are working a full year ahead. So that sounds kind of good to me. So in autumn, you're working and knitting on the designs for next autumn. Most of the stuff that I look at submitting to is about 6 months ahead, give or take, sometimes a bit more. So you're talking about now you're knitting samples for autumn. So just as spring starts, you've got to be knitting samples for autumn. And just as autumn starts, you've got to be knitting stuff for spring, if you're knitting samples, which are going to be used for the collections. And that, like, it shouldn't be a problem, because you just tell, like, I know I collect ideas throughout the year, so maybe more spring ideas come to me in spring. I note them down and I'll think to submit them in autumn. And that's well and good, and I try and do that, but something about, like, my inner knitting mojo means that when time rolls around to be submitting the ideas for spring towards the, you know, the end of summer, the beginning of autumn, even if I've already got a lot of the idea worked out, it still takes a lot of time to prepare the actual submission and swatch, and often I can't get myself fully into that mindset yet. It improved this last year with respect to the year before, and maybe this is of no interest to anybody, but it really is important. And it's also important for your own self-published design. Self-publishing, you can maybe take things easier because you're not holding other people back. You haven't got a deadline, it's all down to you, which can be stressful, but you can maybe work through something really quickly. Like maybe I could do, with this one that I cast on and, finished it in well under a month, and I already have half the pattern written up. And depending on how fast testing can go, the process can be down to 2-3 months, depending on the size of the item and the complexity of the pattern and the amount of time you have. This, of course, is an issue. But it's something that I'm still trying to adapt to and think about. And I guess when you make knitting your job or part of your job, in my case, you have to know that you're letting go of a little bit of the joy and the freedom of just doing whatever you want. Of course, I could drop everything and knit whatever I want, but like right now, I'm starting to think about things that I would like to knit with lighter weight yarns, and that's all well and good, but if I invest time and energy into making a design now, I would know I would have to wait until next year, ideally, to release it, because it will not be ready until, let's say, middle of summer, and by that point, you should be putting out patterns for autumn. Anyway, I don't know. This is something, it's just part of my the process that I'm going through at the moment, I guess. And so I was just sharing a little bit of that information with you. So that is everything that I have to show you this week. I hope that you have enjoyed stopping by to have a little chat with me about all things knitting and yarn. I hope that you are all well and will have a really nice Easter weekend wherever you are. If you don't celebrate Easter, I hope you're just having a lovely spring, obviously. And I will hopefully be back with you pretty soon. And yeah, that's everything. So I'm going to say goodbye.